Hello everyone, my name is Sandra Schinnerl and I'm a PhD candidate here at UBC in interdisciplinary studies. And what that means is that I am working between two academic units, one the Faculty of Education and the other political science, the Department of Political Science. And I look at the intersections between education and immigration policy. But perhaps looking at me, you don't think me a typical graduate student. In fact, I came to my PhD studies after working as a practitioner in international education for 25 years here in Canada in the post-secondary system. And through my practice, I started to ask myself questions about how policies are made and how I might contribute to the policy process, making process. And that curiosity brought me back to school. But when I started in international education, there's a picture of me there, way back when, an international student was expected to go home after their studies. In fact, if they had any kind of connection, like a family member being here or any kind of intention to stay, they'd be denied a visa to study. They were not allowed to work after graduation. International students were not seen as immigrants. Their stay in Canada was temporary. And they were expected to go home, and there wasn't any international student support staff or even offices at the time. It was really focused on exchange and short-term mobility. I participated in one myself, and one of the reasons I'm so passionate about international education myself. But the focus was on fostering intercultural understanding and internationalizing the university. Now, taking a look, we have over 572,000 international students, and that's a change from 114,000 students in the year 2000. Really significant change. Canada is now among the top 3 countries in the world that host international students, and we've experienced a 5-fold increase in the number of international students we welcome. And not only do we welcome them, but we recruit them, and we now provide generous opportunities for them to work, both during their studies and afterwards. We encourage them to stay, and we have special preferential immigration pathways for them. They're seen as ideal immigrants, and they want to stay. 60% of international students plan to apply for permanent residence. That's from a study from the Canadian Bureau of International Education. It's a national-wide study that was done. And so in the last 20 years, there have been some really significant changes. One is the marketization of international education and institutions recruiting students as a means of generating revenue through charging differential fees. And in 2016, it was estimated that international students contributed $15.5 billion to the Canadian economy. And at the same time, the Canadian government has been making substantive changes to immigration policy, making it easier for international students to come, to work, to stay, and to immigrate, and as well as a concerted effort to market Canada to the world. And this is at a national level, which is quite unusual because, of course, education is under the purview of provinces. So to coordinate this is actually a really substantial change and achievement. So with all these changes, I was fascinated. Over a short period of time, really only 20 years, we've had a wholesale 180-degree change. And my research looks into the reasons for those major policy changes over the last 20 years and how and why that happened. So one of the interesting things I found out was that there was nothing in the literature that talked about the role of higher education institutions and the kind of influence they played on immigration policy, because it's not intuitive that they might have been involved in something like that. But what I could find actually said that higher education institutions played no role whatsoever. So I actually can prove otherwise. And that is what my dissertation is about. And one of the things that I have put together is a hypothesis that higher education institutions have, in fact, significantly influenced immigration policy in Canada. And they have done so by acting as a special interest group. And they've done that in the following 3 ways. They've used their position as experts to gain special access to policy makers. They've used formal lobbying channels, and they've worked as a sector coalition. And what I mean by that is colleges, university, teaching institutions have all worked together to forward those recommendations to government. And these policy changes have contributed to the huge growth in international students and the increase in international student immigration after the completion of their studies. So I think that's pretty cool as a research question, but the next question to ask is, so what? And why does it matter? And you know, for me, if higher education institutions have actively lobbied for more generous immigration pathways and easier visa and work opportunities for international students, in order for it to be easier to make, for them to recruit international students, then I'm of the opinion that higher education institutions have an ethical responsibility to support not just the learning of international students, but their quest to be part of Canadian society in the longer term. So in other words, universities and colleges must take on the responsibility for supporting the successful integration of international students through work and career guidance, early advising on the immigration process, but also to set expectations appropriately. And I think that higher education institutions need to make sure that with the large number of international students they're hosting, they provide integration for both their campuses and their communities as well. Since most of the 60% of the international students who want to stay, less than a third actually will, we also need to provide not just selling the dream, but making sure the dream can be realized by the international students we host. Thank you.